Starbaby, welcome back to this shortish but very festive message to the 10% audience.
Thank you. Yes, we'll try and make this as festive as possible.
So it's I wanted to say the first thing we're going to talk about is the most unusual topic perhaps of all that I've covered on the channel, and that is what an SR71 tastes like. But before I do that, and I ask you the question, because we're talking about the SR71, I want to say hi to BC Thomas, who's a friend of the channel. He's been on a number of times before talking about SR, flying the SR. He's the high time SR71 pilot. And he's, as I said, a friend to the channel, friend to me personally. And so I want to say hi and Merry Christmas to him. With that said then, he probably doesn't know what an SR71 tastes like. How come you do?
Well, so that's an excellent question. So this is from when I was a cadet. And so cadets that had NAV scholarships to go to Mayfair, we did our field training. An Air Force ROTC program is like officer training light. It means that you go to a civilian college, you dress in uniform for like 1.5 days a week, maybe even only a day a week. In my case, I was on a scholarship. They pay for your tuition. They give you 100 and some odd, I guess $100 a month for pizza and your phone bill. And you're good. And you end up with a commission, same as everybody else. And you haven't been abused by upperclassmen or any of that stuff. But you have to do your 4-year stint of field training where you learn to bounce a quarter off your bed to see if it's made enough, and you walk around in neat rows, and you do entirely too many jumping jacks and push-ups and, running around in circles for no good reason. But they were trying an experiment for people with NAV scholarships or NAV slots. They did a longer course, and they did it at McClellan Air Force Base, which is right next to Mayfair Air Force Base, where NAV training was. So after I do my 4 weeks of stuff, I've got a week to do things like get a flight in, fly in the T-43, determine why you never, ever want to learn how to do celestial navigation, all those things that actually gave me a leg up when it came to NAV school. But one of the things we did is we went up to Beale Air Force Base to take a look at the airplanes flying. This is kind of like a field trip thing. And that's when the SR-71s were still flying. So we got to watch an SR-71 take off and land. We got to watch a U-2 recovery. I don't remember a U-2 launch, but it did happen. And then we got to go in the hangar. And so it was funny listening to the earlier cast of yours, where are you, senior whatever? Are you, senior toilet bowl cleared in order to get into the hangar to see this thing? And we're just a bunch of cadets, and we walk in because now it's no longer that big a deal. And so I'm walking around the SR-71, and that's an awesome machine, and it's close. And one of the things I said as a 20-year-old guy, one of the phrases I had when I explained that I was close enough to something is I would say, I'm close enough to lick it. And so I'm standing here underneath the wing of this SR-71, and I'm going, I cannot not do this. And so I just kind of lean up and stick my tongue out, and I lick the underside of the wing. Because I was going to say I was close enough to lick it, so I might as well just lick it. It tastes like burned metal and jet fuel. Because that was going to be the next question, so I just cut you off at the pass. And there we go. That's what an SR-71 tastes like. And I'm not the high time SR-71 guy. I have 0 hours. I've walked around it. I don't even know what the cockpit looks like, but I do know what it tastes like.
So here's a follow-on question. Did you know that RAM is toxic?
No, but it's only toxic now that I do. It's only toxic if you swallow it.
Have you got a letter to read to us?
I do. Okay, so we have a letter because this has just been kind of... I've got feathers floating around. This is one of those questions that came out, and I decided that I would bring the letter out again. So let me set the context. I'm in an F-4 squadron. I'm at Nellis. I've missed the Gulf War, by the way, so this is still an issue. We're the only op squadron at Nellis. And I was one of the youngest instructors at Nellis, I think, and I'm not sure I was an instructor at the time, but I was when I became an instructor, I was the youngest instructor on the base. And I would brook no down talking. I don't care if you're a 422 dude or you're a weapons school guy or whatever. You're not going to talk down to anybody in the op squadron, particularly if that somebody is me, because I'm just going to rise up. And the intel guys used to refer to me as the alligator because they said I would sit in a briefing room with nothing but my nostrils and eyeballs showing, and the next thing you know, you'd be eviscerated. I don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, so Captain Eric Best, F-16 fighter weapons school instructor, pens an article in, of all places, a Navy magazine. So in the 90s, the Navy tactical magazines were, as much as I hate to say it, awfully good. And they also had pictures, which made them way more readable for your average pilot. And Captain Best had written an article, which I'm going to read you an excerpt from, that just pissed me off. And since he started this ball rolling in writing, I had to answer it in writing. So I'm going to read it. It's dated 10 September 1993. It is to Captain Eric Best from the Wild Weasels. Subject, gross written buffoonery. And it starts out, 1. For your consideration, the following is reprinted without permission from Aimpoint, Naval Strike Warfare Review, Volume 9, Issue Number 1, Winter 1993, page 47. Conclusion. Today, the F-16 is one of the most widely deployed fighters in the world. Therefore, the likelihood is high of flying composite operations with the F-16 in the next exercise or war. With its versatility and capability, the Viper has rapidly become the F-4 of the 1990s. Because of the newness of some of these missions, many F-16 units are starting on the ground floor. Magnum, Laser-On, and Fox 3 are relatively new in the vocabulary of many Viper drivers. Despite this fact, we flex well to any situation, learn fast, and should always be a positive factor in the overall mission outcome. This went over like a lead salami. And so I started writing. Paragraph 2. In case you haven't noticed, the F-4 is the F-4 of the 1990s. Any comparison between that worthless piece of flying FOD that you buzz around in and the mighty Phantom II is insulting to the many men who have fought and died in the F-4. The Phantom II was flying defense suppression and air superiority missions over Hanoi, dropping LGBs with a paved knife on the Paul Doomer Bridge, and flying Cass in the Iron Triangle, to mention just a few, long before your flying toy was a wet dream in the minds of the Texas congressional delegation. Paragraph 3. The misplaced belief that the F-16 is a true multi-role fighter is no doubt a contributing factor to the common occurrence of Vipers spearing rocks, dirt, trees, other aircraft, and large bodies of water with the pitot tube. The F-16 was designed to be a cheap day VFR fighter, and no amount of training or money will ever be able to overcome that limitation. If any aircraft today approaches the potential for comparison to the F-4, it is another two-seat, two-engine McDonnell Douglas product in Air Force service. Paragraph 4. Any attempt to inflate your basement level status by comparison to what is, quite simply, the best jet fighter ever built and the defender of the free world for over 30 years is a pitiful attempt to boost your ego by comparing yourself to better men flying a better aircraft. The F-4 has flown more types of missions in a superlative fashion than the F-16 could ever consider. We would all love to see the day when an F-16 lifts off with 24 Mark 82s and 4 air-to-air missiles on a combat mission. And the F-4 became the world's best ever distributor of big parts with 1950s technology AIM-7Es, AIM-9Bs, and Cannon without having to wait for the introduction of the AMRAAM. Paragraph 5. As if 4 weren't enough. The simple fact of the matter is that the dismal combat performance of the F-16 in the Gulf War is directly responsible for the continuing service of both the F-4 and the A-10. The F-16's inability to deliver its inadequate ordnance load accurately resulted in the need to reattack targets, endangering men needlessly and wasting resources. It wasn't the F-16 that ran a SAM killing 8 shift through the most intense air defenses ever encountered by the Air Force over Baghdad on the first night of the war. The only reason Magnum is even in your vocabulary is because the dwindling numbers of Phantoms led to the conclusion that an F-16 on the wing is better than nothing at all, but only just. Paragraph 6. The only people that have not caught on to this glaring inadequacy of the F-16 are the people that drive them. The only foreign customer stupid enough to purchase the F-16 since the war has been Taiwan, largely because, 1, they placed their order long before the war, and 2, they had no real option because they were not offered the F-18 and don't already operate the Phantom II. Even your own manufacturer bailed out of the business as soon as they realized they could no longer rely on general and gross stupidity to sell their flying failure. Paragraph 7. To wrap this up, we greatly resent the misguided and faulty comparison of the F-4 Phantom II to the Fighting Falcon, the only fighter aircraft in history to be named after a second-rate college football team. Any resemblance between the McDonnell Douglas Phantom II supersonic all-weather fighter bomber, mostly bomber, and your miserable single-seat, single-engine, computer-designed, fly-by-wire composite airframe, software-driven, day VFR, ice-fod-sucking, weak-dick, bubble-canopied, target-missing, ground-impacting, non-hook-raising, auto-trimming, piddle-pack-ejecting, G-locking piece of flying pork-barrel politics is limited to the fact that both aircraft have an F designation. Your aircraft should have a blue stripe painted around the nose and for training use only stenciled on the fuselage. And you can go to the club tonight knowing that your article and this letter occupy a significant place in our Doofer book. Signed, the Wild Weasels. So, every pilot and EWO available in the squadron who wasn't deployed signed that except for Tom Pfeiffer. I was my flight commander. And Tom for 2 reasons. 1, because he was the only one left in the squadron with any level of maturity and brains. And 2, because he's an Air Force Academy graduate and didn't like the fact that I refer to the Fighting Falcons as a second-rate college football team. Everybody else signed it. It went in the Doofer book. We sent the original to Captain Eric Best. Issue over. Issue not over. We have McDonnell Douglas tech reps in the squadron, 2 of them. Like many Phantom squadrons, they have a fax machine and a phone book. So they faxed that letter to every McDonnell Douglas address they had in the book. And then for good measure, they started sending it to General Dynamics because it was GD and not Lockheed that was building the airplane at the time. So if there's any claim to going viral before the internet, I've got it. It was all over the place. I got calls. Chris Chili calls me from in theater, an Audubon phone, bad connection. He's calling me from the theater and he's chewing me out for poisoning the relationship between the F4 guys and the F-16 guys because Spangdahlem had mixed squadrons. And I care not one bit. And if you look for the F4 of the 1990s, occasionally it can pop up on an internet search, but some of those have been altered. So you will note, uncharacteristically, there's no profanity in that letter. So if you see one with things inserted, that's not the original. This is the original file that I've been carrying around for almost 30 years.
Did Captain Best get back to you?
Captain Best apologized for his reference and left the base. And I saw him again when he and I were both colonels. And Eric Best, F4 in the 1990s, how's that going for you? And he just did not have the time and inclination to deal with me in any capacity. Which is,
That's a valid response.
It's a valid response.
Okay. And did you have a poem or anything for us?
I did. I had a poem. God, see, I don't just read other people's poetry. I can write it. Mostly limericks, and often with words that rhyme with Nantucket. But in this case, it was a different situation. So we're getting in advance of ourselves because we haven't talked about any of my irregular warfare experience. So for the audience, I spent a number of years running around with a rifle on the ground as an embed in U.S. Army infantry, military police, and combat engineering units. So I did a lot of fun stuff. Although most people would not describe things like IED hunting, roadside bomb hunting, as fun stuff, I do. And so, no shit, there I was, 2007 in Baghdad, and it's the surge, so it's throw a bunch of guys in there and hope you can calm things down for a while. And of course, things are exploding every which way. And I decided that I was going to write my very own little Baghdad document to the night before Christmas. And there's a couple of things I'm going to explain before I actually get going so that it doesn't drive people by. So LZ stands for landing zone. Okay. And I think most people know that. But the thing that most people might miss is what's called a 525 drill. So a 525 drill is an Army thing they teach you, is that when you hop out of a vehicle in an area with a mine threat or a roadside bomb threat, you do your 525 drill. Is first you take a good look in the 5-meter radius around you, and then you take a look in the 25-meter radius around you. You're looking for different threats. So inside 5 meters, you're looking for something that you might step on, and for 25 meters, you're looking at something else that might shoot at you. So that's what a 525 drill is. And it's something you want to do whenever you dismount outside the wire and you get into a habit. And the last thing is, I'm going to say crew in here. And that was the crew was the protective electronic warfare equipment the jammers that you put on your trucks in the hopes that you were able to jam radio-controlled IEDs. So I think that covers this kind of stuff. Oh, yeah. IBA stands for individual body armor, and IFF is identification friend or foe. So are we ready to rock?
We are.
All right. So the actual title of this is A Visit from St. Nicholas, and it was by Major Henry Livingston Jr. I just modified it a bit. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the place, young soldiers were dreaming of beer by the case. The stockings were hung by the gun rack with pride in the hopes that there soon would be porn flicks. Denied. Sergeant's major lay abed, tense in the rack, thinking even at Christmas there would be no slack. And so I lied down, just my pillow and me, as I thought pleasant thoughts of my wife in D.C. When out on the quad arose a noise rather dire, scary but different from indirect fire. So I grabbed my helmet, armor, and cup, and popped out the door to see what was up. Sans lights through the darkness I quietly sneaked, and around the blast barrier I carefully peeked. The moon on the dust gave just enough light to see what was happening, even though it was night. And the thing I saw in my hasty survey was jolly Saint Nick in an up-armored sleigh, complete with elf gunner who cowered in wait, afraid they had stepped on an armed pressure plate. And I must now admit to substantial surprise at seeing old Santa in armor his size. And up from the LZ there arose such a din as reindeer started whining about the place they were in. The reindeer complained about their helmets nonstop, with antlers poked up through holes in the top. Poor Rudolph and Santa seemed to come close to blows because of the rhino in front of his nose. And the stuff they were hauling would make anyone mean. The sleigh, it was loaded like a C-17. Then Santa instructed his folks to hold still until all had finished their 525 drill. Green up, bellowed Santa, who quite clearly knew that Comet had forgotten to shut down the crew. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen. On Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen. To the top of the trailers now, lightly I say. Nobody knows how much we now weigh. And silently, for we want no one alarmed, because, as you know, they're quite heavily armed. So up to the rooftops, they stayed in the hover, went Santa while looking for much better cover. As he carefully alighted from his ride in the lull, I noticed the sleigh had a new V-shaped hull. I really miss chimneys, he said with a grin, as he frantically looked for another way in. So I broke from my hide sight and came to the fore, and to make his life easy, I opened the door. And he stepped right inside, a deep breath he took, and I saddled up close for a much better look. His adornment was different from what I recall, dressed in new camo, with no red at all. Some things were just right, like the bulging toy sack, with the audible slosh of a filled camelback. His eyes, they still twinkled, his cheeks just as rosy, in a thin slate parka that made him look cozy. And if his belly still shook, no man could tell, strapped as he was in his IBA shell. And from over his shoulder, in a standard light green, poked the telltale antenna of a 117. He had pouches and pockets attached everywhere, and a bright orange panel to be seen from the air. His pipe, it was gone, I was happy to know, to ward off the fire that would be drawn by the glow. He spoke not at all, just went right to his work, while the elf in the turret went loudly berserk. Get a move on, fat boy, and get off the ground before we are spotted and we all catch a round. But Santa just smiled, his hand in a pocket, no doubt unconcerned about the occasional rocket. And Santa, as always, remained in control. We're off to 3 Corps to fill stockings with coal. And they lifted off slowly while he called on the air. This is Sleigh 01, low traffic beware. They flew low and slow, clearly showing no malice, off to the stockings that were hung in the palace. And I thought to myself, as I saw they were gone, man, I certainly hope that his IFF's on.
Bravo. Very
good. Thank you, my fans.
Thank you. So thank you for everything you've done for the channel this year. It has been great to have you as a guest initially and then as a regular. And I really enjoy the Ukraine analysis that you do, the Ask Starbaby stuff. So, and as I've said before, you know, if you're still enjoying yourself, I'm still enjoying myself, and the audience is still enjoying the content we're putting out, then we'll keep it going as it is. No need to change it.
Great. Well, thanks again. And again, happy holidays. And there we go.
Thanks, Dubby. Thanks for tuning in to 10% True. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to subscribe, and if you're on YouTube, hit the bell button to make sure you get notified of the next episode. Thanks and take care.